We have a guest joining us in the studio this morning, and a little bit of a different twist. We talk about firearms issues on Friday between 9 to 9:30. Right now, coming up on 7 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you, of course, on Top Story. It's 53 at News Radio 1310 KLIX and at newsradio1310.com. I have a guest in studio who comes here with a unique experience. Forrest Anderson was mentioning this last week that there are sometimes differences in training when women are training with firearms. Actually, he believes that they don't have the bad habits that many men bring to this. And he was saying that one of his friends had been through this, and actually, she had written actually a report about it, basically, that I had a chance to look at last week as well. Christina Pendle, right?
Yes.
That's the name, and joining us in studio this morning. And uh, you are, I guess now, you have a permit and everything else, and you went through all of this. And when you started, though, you were somewhat of a newbie, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I picked up my first gun at the age of 30 years old by a boyfriend who was like, let's go out. I want to teach you how to shoot. I was like, oh, this will be fun. Okay, sure. So, of course, he puts the 38 special or 38 revolver in my hand, snub nose, loads it up. It goes. I don't hit a thing. 10, 6 shots, whatever it was. I don't hit anything 10 feet away. He's like, what? I was like, well, what did I do wrong? He's like, I don't know. Try it again. Okay, well, here we go again. Didn't shoot anything. I was like, shooting's not for me. I'm not good at shooting. A year later, then I had a new boyfriend who was a competitive shooter who really understood instruction. He had time in the military. And so that's when I really started to understand that it was something that I could do, breaking down, teaching it to me in a, in a, in a great way. Um, and
Was it a long process?
It was. I mean, that was a year later, so I'm kind of losing my train of thought.
Forrest said something interesting that, when you just brought up the first time you did this,
hmm
you were discouraged.
Yeah.
He mentioned these videos that you see that people post to Facebook where they'll show women shooting shotguns and the recoil, the force
Uh-huh.
knocks them over, and people think it's funny. And he said, but when you embarrass someone like that, or they just don't have a good experience,
hmm
a lot of times they'll walk away from it for good.
hmm
So when you're doing this, you actually need to find someone who's going to be, number one, I guess, patient.
hmm
And because when you mentioned, if you've never done this before,
hmm
and I hadn't done it for 30 years. I was away from it from 1986 until just recently.
hmm
And then I was on the range with Forrest a couple of weeks ago, and he said, try it.
hmm
Um, and there were some things I had to quickly learn about again. Some things came back, but still, he didn't make fun of me when I missed the target. And if somebody's standing there making fun of you while you do that, it's a little more difficult to say, I want to continue to do this. It'd be like dancing. If you're stepping on somebody's toes,
hmm
I would think that, and if somebody's giving you a hard time about that, then you really don't want to go out and do it again.
No, absolutely. And I was very discouraged after the first time, and just really didn't think that it was for me. And then when uh, fast forward to 2015. So I really had put my gun on the shelf for a while. I didn't really want to spend my money on it. I didn't want to spend my time on it. I didn't think it was all that great. But then I had a friend who had signed up for the enhanced concealed class and wasn't able to take it. So I went in his place. And that was the first time I actually had firearms instruction and had somebody break it down for me. And that really just made me realize that it was something within my power that I could do. And it was very just encouraging. It was somebody who wasn't there to make me look silly, somebody who wanted me to succeed. And I think that's really important to find those people if you want to get into firearms that are going to help you to succeed.
Now, you mentioned the first time out when you were firing a 38 snub nose.
Yeah.
That was my dad's service revolver when
Uh-huh.
I was a kid. And I remember firing those too, but because of that short barrel and everything else,
Yeah.
it's a challenge to fire something like that because
And he didn't show me how to hold it or anything, and it was very frustrating. I was like, "Oh, I thought shooting would be easy. I've seen it in the movies, and they just fly through the air, and it looks awesome."
they use one hand, they hold it at their waist, and they fire in a general direction and they hit
And they
everything.
hit everything with one hand, like face off. Man, those guys, that's what I thought shooting was going to be all about.
Is it true that because another point he made is, and I've heard this from some, I was just telling you off air, a friend of mine who used to work for as an undercover federal narcotics
Mhm.
agent has said the same thing, that he feels that women are easier to train in firearms, and Forrest says that's because you don't pick up the bad habits that a lot of, and there's not a machismo involved with it, where men come in and they've got to maybe think they've
Mhm.
got to show off or prove something to someone else that we're a different type of species in a sense, and
Yeah.
that we come to this with different attitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of men have been shooting, a lot of the friends that I have that are men, they've been shooting their entire lives. They've had their entire lives to develop their habits or what they think they should be doing right. And, I came into it and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Teach me. I was very malleable with that.
You
So
have to have that attitude though too, right? You can't come in and you just have to be very humble about it to start with.
I think so. And that's something that I look at. And when I go out in the gun world, I just admit I know, next to nothing in this. You know, teach me. Yeah, absolutely. And women have that ability to sometimes admit, be a little bit more humble about things and admit that they need the help and they want the help.
Now,
Yeah.
your background, you've
Mhm.
trained people yourself in not necessarily in
Not in
firearms, but
firearms, no. In sports though, but I was a snowboard instructor.
and by doing that, it's the same idea.
Mhm.
You're getting a lot of novices who are coming
Mhm.
out. Sometimes you may be getting people who know a little bit more about it, but there does have to be. I had a skating coach in college who was so nasty. I just didn't want to go any longer, and he kept telling me, "You look like you're walking in cement," and it might have worked well with his hockey team,
Mhm.
but it didn't work well with me, and I just had no use for the guy by the time the course ended.
Mhm.
But there has to be that patience, not only with the person who's trying to learn, but with the instructor as well. Then I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, men, and that's funny too, because men communicate in sarcasm as a means of affection, and women don't communicate like that. So that would definitely, that kind of attitude would definitely fall short with women as
And they,
well.
in other words, that would be a turnoff for
Yeah.
them if they were actually trying to train.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Now, having gone through this, I take
Hmm.
it you're very you've reached a point where you're very proficient now at
Hmm.
it, and
Hmm.
uh, I was reading some of the details you wrote
Hmm.
about it and what it was like. Would you recommend it for most women or all women?
I mean, it's just like any sport. I mean, if you don't want to kayak, I'm not going to tell you you should go kayak. But if you have the desire to do it, it's something that you want to do. The only barriers that you're going to be creating are for yourself. There are some perceived barriers about knowledge and cost and um, equipment, safety, that sort of thing. But it's all barriers that you can overcome, and there's plenty of resources for us out there.
And for a lot of women, I think in the beginning there may be an intimidation. Where do I go? How
Hmm.
do I start? And everyone's. I mean, heck, after 30 years, I'm worried about shooting off my toes again. It's that all those things come into play.
Hmm.
Is there a place you'd refer them to go to, or a place to start, or what?
I mean,
Maybe even talk to you for your own experience.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would be willing to talk to anybody. I've taken classes, in Haley with Tamarack Sports, and then Shaw Shooting down in Hagerman, and I did a fantastic women's class at Shaw Shooting, and so those are a couple places that I would recommend to go.
Do you recommend that women train separately from men, or is that up to the individual too?
Well, in my experience and kind of trying to research about women in firearms and how do we get more women into firearms, there are some studies that show that women in an all women setting are more engaged. They're willing to ask more questions. They're not interrupted and have an overall positive experience. And within that, when there's a same gendered instructor or role model, there's even more inspiration. I mean, when I was a snowboard instructor, there were a lot of women who would ask specifically for a female instructor. So, yeah.
I just remember from grade school, when the boys and girls sometimes would play gym together,
Hmm.
there was always a certain element of the boys that wanted to show off,
Uh huh.
and sometimes they're not concentrating on what they should do. So perhaps the training, separate training, and training just women with women as instructors sometimes might be the better approach to go.
Yeah, because sometimes we can't separate that. And like with the snowboarding, people would say, "Oh, don't the girls want the hot guy? Don't they want that,
Yeah,
rad with the long hair?" No, not necessarily, because they don't want to, have that intimidation. They just want to focus on, the goal and learning
they're not
the
looking for
skill.
a husband; they're looking to snowboard.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not on the range looking for a husband. I'm just looking to shoot some stuff up.
Are you proficient enough now, or perhaps you could even be an instructor? I'm curious to know about that.
I would think so. I think in some regards, absolutely. I have, an education background myself, and so I know how to teach things. And I think it's not always the no being the best at something, but it's about being able to break something down and instruct it. And that's where like a lot of guys that go out and try to teach their girls to shoot, they're maybe great shooters, but they don't know how to instruct something like kind of what happened with me. So I think that that's the difference. Does that make sense?
Well, in my case, of course, I'm learning all over again
Hmm.
about various models.
Mhm.
about various ammunition differences and the like.
Mhm.
And these are things that I put on the shelf years ago,
Mhm.
and you do forget them. And yet I know people who are, you could talk to them and they will just be able to rattle off 4 or 5 different manufacturers and why
Mhm.
one is better than another in this area, and perhaps this pistol is better than that pistol. And then they'll talk to you about various calibers and the like. And I'm impressed by that. But that's part of it too. It's more than just aim, shoot, right?
Mhm.
You end up having to learn about all of these other things too as well. And at some point, you become, I guess, part of that gun culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a learning process. There's a lot that people talk and I'm like, I don't even know what they're saying. So I ask them, hey, back up, slow down. And I don't perpetrate that I'm an expert in any ways, but I do surround myself with people that are very knowledgeable in the gun world. Forrest, who you speak with at Washington Street Pawn, he's helped me select a couple of my weapons, and I'm like, here's what I want, here's my use for it, here's how much I have to spend. And there's people out there that'll help you with it
And that's
and
the thing.
navigate that.
When you go in and you walk in,
Mhm.
everyone's telling me you got to make sure that it fits, the pistol fits in your hand or the revolver,
Mhm.
whatever you're
Mhm.
using, and you've got to have, you lay out what you're looking for,
Mhm.
and then they respond by saying, try this.
Yeah. Well, and if you're spending hundreds or thousands of dollars, like they should be willing to help you out.
Yeah.
And they absolutely are because then also, I mean, it behooves them to get you into shooting and make you confident with it because then you're going to come back and buy more guns.
I do you have a preference between, let's say, a pistol or a revolver? Now that you've done both,
I prefer like semi-automatic pistols myself, just because I do USPSA shooting and that's what I like. Revolvers have a certain, romance about them, so I'll certainly shoot revolvers. But yeah,
but trying to reload a revolver too as well. I mean, it's a time
yeah,
consuming.
yeah. I just think that it's, I don't know. That's just the preference that I have. But some people really just like the revolver. I think it's classic, romantic, and I like shooting them. But my everyday and what I'm out there shooting would be semi-automatic pistol.
We've got a break in about 30 seconds, but if you can stick around through 9:30, I want to talk to you a little bit about self-defense issues too, as well, because more and more women obviously are thinking this is the route to go.
Mhm.
Because if you're pulling off a rest stop on the interstate, you never know who's going to be there.
Mhm.
Maybe we can delve into a little bit of that in the next few minutes.
Yeah, sounds good.
We've got Christina Pendle in studio with us this morning, and we're coming up on a break at 9:20. It's 53 right now. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. One thing I got to ask you quickly before we get into the break, though. Forrest and I have not yet come up with a catchy name for the show. You might need to help us out.
All right,
All
I'll work on it.
right. We've got more on the way in just a few minutes. We have a guest in the studio with us. Christina Pendle is joining us, and we're talking about firearms today, and also women involved in firearms training. And you were just pointing out to me during the break that there's something that you think that people should know about this as well. Obviously, when it comes to women and men in shooting, right?
um, yes.
Yes. Look at that. I said, is there any other point that I forgot to bring up? And
Oh, just that men are the ones that are bringing, especially adult women,
right,
into shooting sports. Is that what you're referring to?
right, right.
Yeah, and it's usually, a husband or a boyfriend. A lot of the time, you're on a date, and he brings you out to shoot. But women just learn a little bit differently, and so just kind of being aware of the differences of women, how we like to talk more, communicate more. We don't like the competition as much. We don't want the sarcasm, putting the right gun in our hands, and just really going at our pace or some just a few things, quickly that I think men can really consider when they're teaching their women how to shoot.
And it's not a joke, obviously, as we pointed
Mhm.
out with those videos that we
Mhm.
see earlier,
Yeah.
because firearms, it's serious
It
business.
is serious as a heart attack. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right. Now, self-defense.
Mhm.
More and more women are doing this. I was sharing with you off air why my sister is getting involved.
Mhm.
She had an issue with someone trying to knock down her door
Yeah.
on broad daylight a couple of weeks ago,
Mhm.
and so now she's decided it's time to get back into this. It's been a long time since she's actually held a pistol or a revolver. But if you're driving to Boise and you've got to stop at a rest stop or do
Mhm.
something like that, you don't know who's there.
Mhm.
Sometimes even in broad daylight. Self-defense is a critical issue here too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I mean, for me as a concealed carry permit holder, learning to operate my firearm confidently in a self-defense situation is very important. Drawing from a holster or purse, situational awareness, and just overall effectiveness. And yeah, many women are encouraged to carry guns by their significant others. learn to shoot for protection. But you need the good training and the practice, because that was a mistake that I had made a few years ago, is carrying a gun, but not really practicing with it. And looking back now, had I been in a real self-defense situation, would I have been able to make the right decisions and defend myself and not injure anybody else?
In that situation too, where your heart starts to beat fast,
Mhm.
and if your pistol's in your purse,
Mhm.
wherever you've got it, you've got to reach for it, you've got to get a hold of it, you've got to get time to aim,
Mhm.
and all of those things. That's where the training is key, I guess, because muscle awareness, as I've heard
Yes.
it called, right? It's just
Mhm.
after a while you train so it becomes almost like just one fluid motion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, you need to be aware of it. Like, I've sometimes changed the way that I dress so that I can conceal a pistol, and you know, not can't wear tight clothing, gotta wear a baggy shirt or something. So you really do have to change. It's amazing how it does change the way that you act in your daily behavior to carry a gun. And it's a lot of responsibility. And if you don't want that responsibility, don't carry a gun just because somebody wants you to. Really, if you're going to carry a gun, I think you need to take it seriously and get the right training.
And situational awareness, for instance, if you're in a
Hmm.
mall parking lot, or
Absolutely.
there's all of these places, I mean, odd places people don't think about it, but the grocery store,
Hmm.
even in sometimes broad daylight, if there's not a lot of people around and you're behind a car trying to load the groceries or whatever else,
Hmm.
you got to be aware of that. But you also got to be aware too that if you do have to defend yourself with a firearm, you got to be aware too that there are other people around as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. And I've heard of some self-defense situations where, where there've been shootings, let's say in a mall or whatnot, where people actually were armed on scene, but they didn't shoot because that would have put more people at risk. And that's all your responsibility. You can't just pull your weapon and shoot somebody in self-defense, make a mistake and get off scot-free. You're going to be answering to those actions.
Right. Some liability that would be part of all of
It's
this
very
too.
serious. It's very serious. It's a
Do you
very
think that
serious
most
thing.
people are even aware of that as they go into training, or is this something that you learn along the way too?
I think it's something you learn along the way. I mean, from my experience, I'll admit it, and I was carrying, and I don't think that I had the education that I needed at the time, and that's really opened my eyes to that now. So I definitely try to convey that to everybody, not just women, but to everybody, that if you're going to be carrying a gun, you need to know what you're doing.
We got about a minute left. I was
Hmm.
going to say though that here in Idaho, because so many people now are carrying.
Uh,
One of the troopers that joins us on the air periodically said to me one day, he said, "I assume everybody carries,"
yeah,
and
yeah,
in that sense, because so many women now do as well, in a way has become a deterrent, I would assume. So even though no one knows who out there is potentially carrying, a lot of those people who might have approached someone in a mall parking lot or at a
hmm.
rest stop in the past have to think twice about it now.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would absolutely hope so.
And the more women who actually train and end up in this situation, and word gets around, I would think that in that alone would drop crime by a certain percentage across the state.
Yeah, I don't know the facts on that, but I would absolutely hope that too. And
Right.
my goal is just that people are protected. And me carrying my gun too. I hope I never have to use it, but it does give me the confidence to do things, go places by myself, that I may not otherwise have. So
And you'd recommend dropping by and seeing Forrest for anybody who's a novice at the moment
yeah,
for all those
absolutely.
questions to get answered, size of the pistol you'd carry, caliber, everything else.
Yeah, Forrest at Washington Street Pond. I mean, I've really gotten serious about shooting in the last year, and he has helped me out so much to get the right guns in my hands at the right time. Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for dropping by today. It was fascinating reading all of your story last week about all of this. And I hope that you inspire some other people too as well.
I hope so too. That's my goal. I just want to be an advocate for people to be safe shooters and for women to really come into the sport.
We want to thank Christina for coming by today. We've got a short break coming up. It's 9:30 and it's 53. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com.